Welcome to the Twist Out Cancer podcast, which delves into the emotional journeys of those touched by cancer, offering a platform for survivors, caregivers, previvors, and loved ones to share their experiences. Through intimate conversations, this podcast explores the power of creativity and connection in navigating the challenges of cancer. Guests will discuss the transformative impact of Twist Out Cancer's unique programs and highlight the resilience of the human spirit. We're so happy you're here. Let's get into it.
Hi there, and welcome to Twist Out Cancer's podcast, featuring Power Partners Spotlights. My name is Soraya Fata, and today we are talking with Marty Hogan, cancer survivor and founder of Windsor Tough. We will talk with Marty about his cancer journey, how he got connected to Twist Out Cancer, his organization, and what we can look forward to seeing from him in the future. Welcome, Marty, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Me too. So there's so many things that I really want to talk about today, and I don't know what we can fit into our brief time together, but I definitely want to start with your cancer story. Can you just share with us a little bit about your diagnosis and your treatment?
Sure, absolutely. I am a leukemia survivor. Was diagnosed about 9 years ago, 9 years ago now. And the real short version of the story, my wife Whitney and I had gotten married in January. We actually just had our anniversary the other day. And so that was in January. We found out in June that we were pregnant with our first child. July, we bought our first home together. And then in September, I was diagnosed with leukemia, ALL, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And similar to a lot of people, I feel like, 2020 hindsight, right? You look back and you're like, oh, that was a sign that something wasn't right. But you're just going about your daily life and you're young and healthy, working and enjoying time with friends and family, and friends and family members were getting married and we're traveling and doing different things, working during the week, traveling on weekends to go celebrate with people different events in their lives. And I was just kind of dragging a little bit. And Whitney was the one that was like, you really need to go see the doctor. You seem, not yourself. Normally you're 100 miles an hour, 8 days a week. And I just feel like you're kind of dragging a little bit. Why don't you go see your doctor? I was like, I'm fine. So she said, this time she was 4 months pregnant. She said, for the baby, do it for the baby. I said, of course, tomorrow morning. So I did that and kind of begged my physician to draw blood. He looked at me and he was like, I think you're okay. Like, just like everybody else, you're probably not exercising enough. You're 10 pounds overweight. You're not sleeping enough. You're working too much. Like, live healthier. Come back and see me if you don't feel better. And I said, Whitney's really bugging me to get blood drawn. Would you mind doing that, for her and the baby? And he said, yeah, that's fine. So the next day I had blood drawn on spot, and the next morning received a phone call and he said, you need to come see me immediately. And I was driving into work. I work at a hospital, at a medical center. And so I was driving into work when he called me, and went right to his office when I arrived, and they did a bone marrow biopsy 30 minutes later. And then the following day, Whitney and I received a phone call that I was diagnosed with ALL.
Wow, I just stop you there. First of all, way to be a self-advocate. Had kind of a similar thing happen to me. So I'm a cancer survivor as well, ovarian cancer. But when I went in to get my blood drawn, they did the CA 125, which is like the typical type of ovarian cancer. And it showed up negative. So the doctor was like, you're fine. But something was really off. We were going through fertility treatments and I wasn't very responsive to the medication. So there was like a tumor that the doctor could see. So I just felt like something must have been there. Like, I didn't think it was a fibroma. I felt like it was something else. But after they did that blood draw, nothing was there. So I asked the doctor to do surgery to remove that, because in any case it was getting in the way of my fertility. And it turns out I had a rare type of ovarian cancer that is that you can check with the blood test inhibin B, but not with the CA 125. So thankfully, I have advocated to remove this thing surgically. Um,
Oh my goodness.
Otherwise, I don't know how much that would have progressed.
Sure. Yeah. It's such a, I mean, you know better than anybody, such a journey, right? And you look back at things and little forks in the road and things like that. So honestly, and I hate to say this, but like Whitney was the one, and I'm doing my best to try and keep her comfortable and at rest and at peace, right? So I'm like, telling my doc, I'm like, Milt, Whitney's pregnant, as you know. Can you just draw blood, please? He's like, yeah, I really don't, sure, if you want. I'm like, please, it'll keep her happy. Like one of those, kind of smile, draws blood. And thankfully, literally, so that was a Tuesday when we drew blood and did the bone marrow biopsy. Wednesday morning, we received a phone call. I'd taken the Wednesday off of work because we had our 20-week ultrasound, like the 3D ultrasound. People were telling us how cool that is. So I'm like, I'm going to go be there. So that's where we got to, see the 3D ultrasound of our kid. And then driving home from that appointment, we received the phone call saying that I was diagnosed. I was 12:22 p.m. on Wednesday. And then Friday evening at 6 p.m., I was checked into an isolation room at Northwestern
What was
and
through your
started
mind,
chemo Monday.
what was going through your mind when you got that phone call?
I mean, honestly, it was how is it going to affect Whitney the baby? It was my first and only reaction. Honestly, I'm like, I'll be fine. We didn't know any details at that point. I'm not a physician or cancer specialist, but help manage people through different things. I'm a dentist, and so we manage patients at the hospital who are in the middle of different treatments for different forms of cancer. So I knew a little bit about leukemias, lymphomas, different types of cancer. So I didn't know details, but kind of sort of knew what I had wasn't super common. But I just said to Wit, like, we'll be okay. Let's figure this out. So that was like Wednesday at noon. And all day Thursday and Friday morning, we went for second opinions just around Chicago. And then got checked in Friday night at 6. And my initial stay involved 42 nights in the hospital. And so for my, like they call it, like induction chemo.
Mhm.
And so it was, that was challenging because I had to limit the number of visitors, because I was immunocompromised or blasting me with chemo to try and, uh, you know, keep me around. And all the while, Whitney's coming to and from the hospital each day to come visit, but then was going home and sleeping by herself. Like our dog obviously would join her, but those were my concerns, right? It wasn't so much of like going through the initial induction chemo. It was like, what's going to happen to her at home, and is she going to be okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is so relatable to any parent. Just, having that diagnosis, if you have a little kid or, a child on the way, all you're doing is thinking about the child. And actually, I have to admit that I listen to, as a good podcaster would, I researched you and your organization and was listening to one podcast you did. I think it was called, gosh, I have some notes on it. It was called
Heroic minds. Yeah. Yeah.
Heroic Mind.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was listening to it last night and I just started crying because you were talking about the why that kept you going throughout your treatment. And it was just, you wanted to walk your child to kindergarten. And, I was first diagnosed with cancer before my daughter was born, but then I had a reoccurrence when she was 18 months old. And that also was my why of going through like a debulking surgery and getting on hormone therapy. Was I want to be around to see my child grow up. And I found it so moving that, and I think it's something that a lot of parents who are going through this, especially parents of young kids, they're really thinking about like the future of their child and being there to see their child go to school. So I'm so glad that you got that moment. You said you were diagnosed 8 years ago. So I'm assuming you did walk your son to school.
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, a lot of times in the cancer world, they will give you your 5-year survival rate, right? As far as some of the statistics that they give, a lot of things are in 5 years, right? What's the 5-year survival rate or whatever. And so with my, specific details, genetics of my disease, my 5-year was really low. And so I'm like, you know what? I always have just tried to keep things like very simple in my life. And um, I like kind of structure and organization, and that's just how my brain works. I'm like, okay, I'm like, diagnosed in September. At first, it was like, I want to get to February 7th. That's it. That's all I want to do. My medical team's telling me that's dicey. I'm going to get to Feb 7. Like,
What was that?
there's
What was,
uh, uh, Whitney's due date.
I see.
And I'm like, she's not going to be in that room delivering a baby by herself, right? That's it. That's all I wanted to do. And then after that, I'm like, okay, my 5-year survival rate, by the textbooks and the research is very low. That ties into, so we had a boy. Our first child was a baby boy. We kept it a surprise. We have 3 kids now. We're blessed to have 3 kids. We kept it a surprise for all of them, so we didn't know. So our first one was a boy. His name's Clark. So, and I was in the mix with treatment for a long time, like 3.5 years of chemo. And so when he was born, I'm like, okay, I know my 5-year survival based on the textbook. That's okay. I've never been a, big, believer of whatever you tell me. No, especially if it's against me, I'll prove you wrong. So I'm like, okay, what's in 5 years? You know what? That's Clark's first day of kindergarten. So they're telling me my 5 years is really low. I want to walk him to kindergarten. And so that was like at first it was get to February 7th, which was his due date. And then after that, I was like, get to kindergarten, right? I'm walking that kid to kindergarten. I don't care what I have to do. If you have to triple my chemo dose, if you need me to stay overnight in the hospital 4 out of 7 nights, like you literally tell me what to do and I will do it. And I promised my team, like, I will be the most compliant patient you have ever met. You guys know my why, what I want to do. And I said, whatever you can do to help me, I'll be forever grateful. And you tell me what I can do, can't do, shouldn't do, and I'll do that by the book. So
Was juggling parenting and chemotherapy. Like, I mean, this went on for 3.5 years. I'm not sure, were you in the hospital for long stays during those periods, or was it a weekly chemotherapy regimen?
yeah, fortunately, I had a few. My longest stay was my initial one when I was first diagnosed, and that was all pre kids. And I had a few other hospitalizations throughout, but it was for quick couple nights at a time. Infection comes up, or I had to have some procedures that they wanted to keep me overnight for a couple nights to make sure, things were going well, post procedure, things like that. But all of my chemo was outpatient. So that was kind of my full-time job. I got weekends off for the most part. Sometimes I'd have to go down on a weekend for a blood draw. But other than that, it was pretty much like Monday to Friday, go down there, either sit in my lazy boy and get plugged in for some fluids at first, and then, chemo sessions or, things that pop up, right? CT scans, MRIs, all that good stuff that comes along with it. So that kind of became my job. Our kids still don't know anything, and we have 3 kids right now. Our oldest, Clark, is 8 years old. He's, everyone thinks their kids are the smartest kids, right? I think he's a smart kid. He's starting to see stuff on TV, right? And we'll be watching a hockey game, and it's Hockey Fights Cancer Month or something, right? At the Blackhawks game, and I'm sitting there crying, watching the TV, and he's like, "What's cancer?" Right? And I'm like, "Oh, you're trying to, other things that catch you off guard, so you kind of got to think on the fly." I'm sure you've experienced that yourself, and so we haven't gone down that path with our kids yet, as far as filling them in. Whitney and I just said, one day when the time is right, many years down the road, like, we'll sit them down and tell them hopefully a really cool story. But for right now, they don't know. I still have a port in my chest. And so, they long time ago, they would, and they still do, like, push it. And like, that's my button, right? Like the teddy bears and whatever, right? Like, you push a button and saying, so Clark, like, he was probably 3 and he's giving me a hug one day, and I had a t-shirt on, and all of a sudden I like feel his hand like stop, and he's kind of going like this, and he looked back and he's like, "Sing." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, sing. And I said, but what are you talking about, bud? And he goes, your button. And then he like grabbed his teddy bear, pushed the teddy bear's button on his chest, and the teddy bear started singing the song. And the teddy bear, the song that always like goes in my brain, do you know the song like, do your ears hang low, do they wobble to and fro? So he had a teddy bear that played that song when he would push a button. So that became my like go-to song. And so then we have a daughter as well, Phoebe. And so when Phoebe got old enough, Clark would be like, Phoebe, go push daddy's button. He sings. So then, and they would like request stuff. They're like, different song. I'm like, oh God, now I have to have like country songs in my head ready to go. And
I love
yeah, but like, different little things like that, right? That you just, I'm like, we're gonna make something up and go with it, because they don't need or want to know about that. And the really refreshing thing for me, anyways, is that they're some of the only people like that are really close to us. Strangers obviously don't know, but people really close to us that don't know, right? And to me that's amazing, right? Because some people, they still, even though I'm finished with treatment, some people still treat you like a cancer patient, or treat you differently and kind of look at you or talk to you differently. And I'm like, it's really refreshing that our kids don't know. I'd walk in the door, I always just say I'm going to work, right? Going to work, leave in the morning, be home at dinner time. And that was to go for a full chemo day. But they didn't know that. And I'd walk in and they, I might have been puking the whole drive home, and I'd, throw my garbage bag out in the side of the house and wipe my face and swish with mouthwash that I kept under the passenger seat, and then walk in the front door, and they'd come racing up and let's go play mini sticks, or let's go to this. I'm like, yep, absolutely. Right. Pull up your big boy pants for 90 minutes until they go to bed, and then you can crash after that. Right. So,
Yeah, I bet it was a
which
very welcome distraction for you too.
amazing. Amazing. It was amazing. Yeah. I lived for that every day.
I mean, you beat the odds. You said that you had a very poor prognosis and you beat the odds. How did you beat the odds?
I mean, I'm not foolish enough to know that there's some luck involved, certainly, because a lot of people that, we met along the way, or that I met along the way, are not with us anymore. And I look at that, I'm like, they had families too, right? Like, why do I get to stick around? They don't. Right. So that still is tough. And so there's definitely some luck and some people higher up watching over us. I do know that. And then again, I just tried to, like I mentioned, just try and be as compliant as possible, and just really focus on like what was truly important. A lot of things had to be put on the back burner for, an extended period of time, and that was okay. Right. It was that was not, my focus was not at the time on my career or on, a bunch of different things. It was literally like trying on a Sunday night or Monday morning, it was try to get to Friday, because we have pizza parties on Friday, and I'm like, I just want to get to Friday. Whatever I have to do to get to Friday. Tuesday, Wednesday might be brutal. I kind of know that based on, you get into the same continuous cycle for 3.5 years. You kind of know how your body's going to feel, give or take. And so, I'd all map it out. I'm like, get to Friday, right? I'm not worried about next year. I'm not worried about 10 years from now or whatever. I'm like, just get to Friday, So yeah, that's
My husband always says when I'm like going through a hard time with something, whether it's cancer related or not, that you have to shorten the time frames that you're looking at. You can't think about next year. You just have to think about, until the end of the week or until advice, and having something to focus on and something to look forward to. I mean, I think that also probably added a very positive element to your treatment. Was you were focused on being there in the delivery room, or focused on being there with your kids when you came home. So I think
sure.
that probably helped you a lot to get through all the rough parts.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about your connection to Twist Out Cancer. I know that we've met through Twist Out
We
Cancer.
have. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I didn't put the connection. I didn't make the connection when we first were introduced, and I decided to interview you. But we were both styled by the amazing Mawish Saeed uh,
Yes.
at the Runway of Resilience.
Yes. You probably don't remember because most of the day I was like hiding behind the curtains in the very back room. And they're like, all right, who's up next? I'm like hiding, trying not to go out there in front of that whole room of people and the spotlight on us. So yeah, but that I remember that very clearly. Yes.
Yeah, and I did have a few flashbacks. I remember you being like really nice, and I feel like at one point I was really rushed trying to do like a quick change or something, and then I needed to like jump in line in a different place, and I specifically remember you being like, "Oh yeah, go for it," or "Here, I could go first," or there was like some exchange at some point that I remember being like, "That
Oh,
got
that's funny.
so nice."
Oh, that's funny. No, I was just trying to help the team. That was very outside my box to
It was
jump in and do something like that. But again, I mean, you know, it's like Jenna asks you to be part of something and before she even said what it was, I was like, yes, of course, Jenna. And she was like, well, do you want to know what it is? I was like, no, it doesn't matter. I'm like, I'll be there. She goes, it's a fashion show. I was like, oh my God. I'll be there, but do you want me to like be in it? She's like, yes, of course. I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
I love that you volunteered before even knowing what it was. I was so excited about that. It was actually one of my favorite things,
That was
especially
awesome, wasn't it?
I just felt like for me at least, going through so when I had my recurrence, we realized that my cancer was metastatic and I had to go into surgical menopause. And so I had all of these changes as a young woman, like, in my
Hmm.
attitude towards myself, like I really had a hard time seeing myself as a young, like, vibrant woman. And doing the fashion show for me was a chance to like be that woman again. So for me,
Yeah,
like it
I
was
love it.
a whole experience.
That's amazing.
So I'm
That's
so glad
amazing.
we got to do that together. But
Yeah,
how did
absolutely.
you first get connected to Twist Out Cancer?
Yeah, so I'm trying. I forget the year, which is not that important. But so a very good friend of mine, Dave Turek, who lives in the Chicagoland area, Dave and his lovely wife Donnie and Donnie's sisters knew Jenna from growing up. Dave's not from the Chicagoland area, similar to myself, but we both married girls who are from the Chicagoland area. So they have a much bigger network that they pulled Dave and I into. And so Donnie's sisters, everyone knew Jenna. And so then Dave became part of Brushes. I remember long before I got sick, Dave telling me, I really got to introduce you to some of these people. And Dave is a dentist and Dave is also an incredible artist. And so he's always had art in his life in different capacities. And so he said, I really want to introduce you to these awesome people. And I would hear about this organization, didn't really know the name at the time. And then when I was diagnosed, I mean, Dave was one of my first phone calls and he said, I need to get you connected to, and he rattled off 3 or 4 different people, Jenna being one of them. And he goes, I don't know. And this is like literally, I think I called Dave the morning I was going into the hospital. So like I'm 36 hours after receiving the call and I have my duffel bag and we're driving downtown and I'm going to get dropped off for months. Like we didn't know if it was 1, 2, whatever. And I called Dave to let him know. And I'd seen him like the weekend before, like totally normal.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? Like similar to, what is going on right now? So I said, I don't really know. I don't really know what the plan is, but I'm on my way downtown. I'm going to be spending a lot of time at the hospital, like weeks or months. I said, I'll call you tomorrow. So next thing you know, I'm getting text messages from Jenna.
Oh,
Hi, Marty. My name's Jenna. I'm friends with Davey. He told me a little bit about what's going on. I know he doesn't know details. You might not know details. I'm here for you. And that was incredible. So then fast forward a year or 2 maybe, and I'm still in the middle of treatment, but enough where, on weekends we could like go out and do stuff. I know that might sound silly, but it probably doesn't to you. And so Dave said, Russian with Cancer has their spring event. Why don't you and Whitney come with us? And so that was our first date night since I had gotten sick. And so her and I, like, we had Clark. I want to say it was probably right after he was born. He's born in February. It's probably that April or May-ish. downtown Chicago. And so we went to the event and we got all dressed up, and, I put on a suit and tie. I had no hair, but put on a suit and tie. Whitney put on a beautiful dress, and we went down and we had someone, I think her mom watched Clark for us, who was a few months old. And we went to this event and we're walking around and looking at some of the art. Dave was an artist. He was matched up with an inspiration. And we're walking around and I'm seeing a bunch of my medical team like there with a glass of wine, and they're walking around like, Marty, Whitney, what are you guys doing here? We're like, Katie, what are you doing here? She's like, I'm at the event, like having a glass of wine. I'm like, amazing. I'm like, my buddy, is an artist and whatever. So we like walked around, we left there, and there's a food truck out in the parking lot. So we like, grab some food from the food truck, and we're driving home. And I remember saying to Whitney, I'm like, I want to be part of that. I don't know how or when or if and all this stuff. But I'm like, that's an incredible group of people. So fast forward again, Dave came and sat on my couch maybe 6 months, year later. And he said, hey, bud, what's going on? We're kind of catching up. He said, I have a proposal for you. I said, okay. He said, as you know, each year I do a piece of art for people with brushes. I want to do a piece of art for you, but I know you're like kind of, not super private, but like, I know it'll take a lot. It's going to be front and center, like out there. And I don't know where you're at with this. I was still in treatment, and I said, bud, I'd be honored. I'd love to. And so I said, what are you thinking? And he goes, I have a couple ideas, but I want it to be a surprise. Do you trust me? And I said, bud, you're one of my best friends in the world. I trust you with my life, literally. I said, you tell me what you need. If not, you go and we'll show up to the event and you let it rip. And he's like, okay. So we did that. And then since then, I've just been involved with, I think that night I like sobbed on Jenna's shoulder and we're like doing the twist on the dance floor, like bawling our eyes out. And I was thanking Jenna. I was like, anything you need, if I can ever help you out, like, please let me know. And she's like, I'm going to. And I was like, and I'm going to say yes. Little did I know, like 3 years later, be as in a fashion show. But I think I told her, like, as I'm sobbing on her shoulder, like, Jenna, I will always say yes to you. Whatever you need, I will always say yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's kind of how, to make a short story long, that's how it's been all in since then.
So that's how I started as well, as an inspiration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you know Jenna and once you're part of the twist community, you never
You're in. You're in. Yeah, you're in. Exactly. You know how it is. Yeah.
So, okay. So that's great. I'm so glad that you were able to share a little bit about your connection to Twist Out Cancer. I've been saving the best for last, which is I really want to
Okay.
hear about the organization that you founded.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So Windsor Tough is the name of the organization. I was born and raised in Windsor, Ontario, which is in Canada, right across from Detroit. So I grew up in a small town outside of Windsor, but Windsor was the biggest city. That's the city where I was born. Not a big city by U.S. standards, but in Canada, I guess you consider it a big city. A lot of Americans know that because they go there when they turn 19, because the drinking age is 19. So like a lot of people are like, oh, I went to Windsor when I turned 19. And like people in Chicago now that I meet are like, yeah, I drove with my friends from Chicago to Windsor when I turned 19. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. But anyway, so Windsor Tough is the name of the organization. Our mission is to raise awareness and grow the blood stem cell donor registry through sports and community inspiration. And so they've recently changed. It used to be called the stem cell registry or the bone marrow registry. The medical world has now adopted the term blood stem cell. So we finally came up with like this mission statement that we loved, and then like 6 months later we had to tweak it to change it. It was a couple words, which is no big deal. So I'm still getting used to getting all that out. So long and short of it, so for a lot of patients with a blood cancer, either if chemotherapy is not working or they are not a candidate for chemotherapy or different specifics of different, genetics of their disease and whatnot, a course of treatment is a stem cell transplant or a bone marrow transplant. Those are the same thing, now called a blood stem cell transplant. And so what that involves is finding a donor and taking those stem cells from a donor who is a really perfect, unique match to you, taking those cells out of that person and then essentially infusing them, injecting them into you. And that's usually done after a bunch of chemotherapy to knock down your immune system. And then you give the body basically a fresh immune system. And so there are, a few different types of blood, right? Blood types, A, B, O, few different combinations, but not many. So a lot of times if you need a blood transfusion, you can find blood, not always easily, but easier. Finding a donor for a stem cell transplant is very, very, very specific. It's like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
And so when we were going down like the fork in the road early on in my treatment, I was not responding to treatment well. And so we started to talk about, okay, if the chemo isn't knocking down the leukemia the way we need it to, what are different options? Stem cell transplant was one of them, and I was having trouble finding a donor. So for patients, if they have a sibling, your siblings are your best chance for a donor. I have an older sister, younger brother. They were both not good matches for myself. So then they have an international registry worldwide, and people can join the registry and you can get put into this database. And then, the computer takes all your genetics and they can match you up with anybody anywhere in the world. And so as we were going through, there was a guy, actually, my best match was a guy in Germany.
Okay.
We didn't end up using him, because I really wasn't doing great still as far as along my course of treatment. And also, the match wasn't perfect. So they were like, he's okay. If this thing goes south really quick and we're on our final straw, we're probably going to use that guy in Germany, but let's cross our fingers that we don't need to and that you start responding to chemo. So for me, fortunately, I made a turn and started responding to the chemotherapy. And so I did not have a stem cell transplant. A, because couldn't find a donor that they were really comfortable using, and B, over time, I responded to the chemotherapy. So we stayed on that course for a long time, for 3.5 years. So as we were going through this, I'm like, a lot of our friends had no idea what that even meant, right? And I'm like, how can we change that, right? A lot of people know that you can donate blood, right? You go to Red Cross or you go to wherever. When we were in high school, they'd go to your gym at my high school and you get like a orange juice and an Oreo cookie if you donated blood. So we're like, yeah, we'll donate blood, of course. Like we get out of class and we get an Oreo and OJ. Like that sounds great.
Passed out, and then
Yeah, right. Yeah.
actually, I was like, this is
Yeah. So, but very few people we found out in conversations were even aware of A, what is a stem cell transplant? B, what does that involve as far as getting on this registry? Because so many people are like, how do I join the registry? We're like, well, you swab your cheek. They're like, and then what? I'm like, then nothing. Then hopefully you cross your fingers and your toes that you're going to match up with somebody who's laying in a hospital bed, hoping and praying for a miracle. Because I said I was that guy. And there's so many people out there that are in the same boat. And so that kind of started the whole thought process of like, what can we do? What's our focus? And people kept saying to me, like, you're very passionate about this. Like every time we talk to you, not that that's like all I talk about, but early on they were like, man, you're so passionate about this. And like, why don't that should be the mission of your organization. And I was like, okay. Not surprising to you or I, Anna, when I like floated the idea out about starting this organization. I'm like, Jenna, you have this amazing organization that you started from nothing. And now look at it, like, it's international. But I said, if you would even give me a few tidbits of advice. So next thing you know, Jenna's setting up Zoom calls with me and sending me information, super helpful as we both know that she is, right? So she really helped me out a lot in like dialing in the mission statement, early failures and learning opportunities that she helped me through. So anyway, so that's what we started. The reason why we chose Windsor Tough as the name, that kind of became our mantra throughout my long treatment. I was a hockey player growing up back home, and a few people, when I was first diagnosed, they knew that the prognosis was not great, and they're like, you know what, man, you're good. You're Windsor Tough. Like, we're not worried about you. Windsor Tough, man. So then next thing you know, like, I still have the same bracelet on, years later. So I had bracelets, t-shirts sent up to the hospitals, and all my family and friends are walking around with these blue bracelets and t-shirts. And this is long before this is when I was first diagnosed. So everyone's saying Windsor Tough, Windsor Tough, Windsor Tough. So then when Whitney and I are like, what are we going to name the organization? She's like, I feel like we kind of have to call it Windsor Tough, right? That's been like our mantra throughout. So that's how the name started. That's our mission statement. And again, trying to stick with the mindset and the motto of just like keeping things very simple and structured, are the two things that we and I was passionate about was like raising awareness, because a lot of people didn't know that this thing even existed, that you could swab your cheek, that you could be matched up with somebody, and how like easy it is to do that. And the other thing is just to grow this registry. The more people that are on this international registry, the better chance of finding that needle in a haystack. Like it's that simple, right? So it's like that became the mission. Raise awareness, grow the registry. How do we grow the registry? Get people to swab their cheek. How do we get people to swab their cheek? Make them aware. How do we make them aware? Get the word out there. Events, lean on our connections, go to schools, get involved with teams, do, at Runway of Resilience, Jenna's like set a booth up on the floor and have swab kits there where people can swab their cheeks. We did, so anything we can do to put ourselves in a position to be around people that might want to swab their cheek. It takes literally 30 seconds and you can save someone's life.
Well, you have one more volunteer here.
Okay. 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 Yeah, there you go. Okay.
And I love that you're growing the registry. I mean, I read somewhere, I don't remember if it was on your Instagram or your website, or maybe it was on the National Registry site, but it was talking about like the chances of finding a match, and also talking about it in terms of different demographics. Like if you're white, I think you have a higher chance of finding a match. Like 79% is what I wrote down. Hispanic and Latino is like 48%. Asian
Yeah.
American Pacific Islander has 47%, and Black patients had a 29% chance. So the more you grow the registry, especially with like a diverse population, the more you're going to get matches.
Yes.
I mean, what's your process like in terms of outreach to diverse communities? Is there any thought of that as you're conducting outreach?
Yeah. So, bringing it back to how, and we mentioned her name earlier because she designed our outfits for Runway, right?
Yeah.
So Mawish, she's based out in New York City. And so after the Runway, she like, I think Jenna or so, heard about Windsor Tough. And so she was like, hey, when I get back to New York, let's set up a Zoom call. I was like, okay. She said, I am involved with the board at the Tisch Cancer Center out in New York City, and I'd love to get Windsor Tough involved with them. And I was like, I would love that. So, Mo, whatever you tell me where and when, and I'll be there. And she's like, leave it with me. So a few days later, I get like this Zoom calendar invite, and she was like, have some slides prepared, tell them about Windsor Tough, tell about your story, and I'll be on the call too. I was like, awesome. So that led to someone who was part of Tisch Cancer Center, had a relationship with Brooklyn College, which is out in New York City. And Brooklyn College has a very diverse student body. And so they're like, we have a health fair in May. Why don't you set up a booth and bring a bunch of swab kits, and you can swab, I don't know if it'll be a couple people or I don't know, but like be available. I'm like, let's do it. So we went out there, and incredibly diverse student body, wonderful people out there. We swabbed dozens and dozens and dozens of people in like a 3-hour window.
Amazing.
And they have all of these partnerships with all these other colleges all over the place. And they're like, yeah, we'll call Billy at this school and Mary at this school and Susie here, like do the same thing there. I'm like, absolutely. So that's kind of how we're a very, very small organization. People are like, yeah, have your marketing team like get in touch. I'm like, you're talking to the marketing team. Like you're looking at them right now. And I'm also like, we have some people that help us out for sure, but we're very, very new in our beginnings.
Yeah.
And it's, I call it like a midnight passion project, because that's when I work on it most of the time, when everybody's in bed, and then I sit down at the kitchen table at midnight and flip open my computer and do some work and send some emails and all that stuff. Right. So, that's what we're just looking to do, is like make connections, form partnerships with people. Growing up in Canada and being involved in hockey, and I've worked in hockey for a long time. We have a partnership with Canadian Blood Services, which is an organization up in Canada. They supply all the swab kits. So if anybody up in Canada, we've done events up at hockey games up there where we've set up in the concourse during the game. People walking around when they go to the bathroom or to get, a hot dog and a beer. They see the booth set up and we have big signs and everything, and people are swabbing their cheek. Again, like dozens and dozens of people in an arena with thousands of people, right? It's like that's a great opportunity. So that's on the Canadian side. In the US side, we have a partnership with NMDP, which is National Marrow Donor Program, used to be called Be the Match. And so they do the same thing as Canadian Blood Services. Any of the swab kits, they send those directly to people. I have a bunch in my basement in a big box. And so they're like, we will give you the kits. We'll ship them to people. We'll do whatever we need to do. Like, we're just happy to help out. So everybody has just been incredible. So now it's just trying to find opportunities and events and connections of where that might be a good spot for our next, we call it like a swab event.
Yeah, I love it. Do you
Yeah.
have any upcoming events planned?
So we're going back to Brooklyn College in May. So that'll be beginning in May. And then in the summer, I do put on a hockey camp back in Windsor in my hometown. And so we have that in July. Some of the players are of the age. So that's one thing to note too. You have to be within a certain age bracket to swab your cheek. And so, kids that are 13, 14 years old can't do it. People that are, 45 and 50 can't do it. It's a smaller age range. And so, some of the hockey players and athletes that we have in our network, they're getting the word out there using their different platforms and things like that. So again, just goes back to like raising awareness. And, we have done a couple swab events at the medical center where I work at, which is in the Chicagoland area. And the plan and the hope is to get on a couple campuses, university campuses here in Chicago, because that age demographic is like the prime swabbing group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that kicks me out, but you can still have my husband.
There you go. There you go. Yes. That's the thing. Like a lot of our friends like, oh my gosh, like, send me an envelope, like a swab kit. And I was like, how old are you? Like 37. I'm like, can't do it. Right. Or, 52 or 40. So the prime age is 18 to 35.
So we got to get my daughter babysitters then.
There you go. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like a lot of, people are, Whitney and I, friends our age, give or take a little bit, are too old. And so a lot of times if we're at an event and we know even the runway of resilience, right? So many people are like at the booth and they're like, here, I'll swab. I'm like, how old are you? I'm like, I don't want to sound like, I'm like, how old are you? Right? I'm like, normally you never ask anybody that, but I'm like, how old are you? And one guy who was in the booth next to us, sharing some products and information, he was like, give me a kit. I'll swab my cheek right now. And this guy was like, clearly like north of 60, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I would love to have you swab your cheek. I said, I mean this respectfully. I'm like, sir, how old are you? And he's like, how old do you think I am? I was like, well, no, the reason I'm asking, I said, you need to be 18 to 35. And he goes, you think I look less than 35? And I said, I do actually. I was like laughing. So then I said, you know what? And we were talking about his kids. And I said, remind me of your kids' ages again. So he told me, and I said, you know what you can do? I said, this QR code right here. I said, if you can scan this and text it to your two kids, I said, that would mean the world to me. And he's like, I can do that. And so a lot of times if we're at events or people come up and they're like, I'm not, we did a little like 1 year celebration last summer because we just hit our 1 year of like being in existence. We're a very, very new organization. So we threw a little party. And when I was thanking everyone, I said, a lot of people in the room here are not under the age of 35. And I said, but can you please put your hand up if you have anybody in your phone that's between the ages of 18 and 35? And of course, everyone put up their hand. And I said, take 5 seconds right now. I said, I'm going to stop talking right now. On the table, you'll see a QR code. I said, if you can scan that to one person in your phone between the age of 18 and 35, I said, that would mean the world to me. And it's like, boom. Next thing you know, people are like sending me screenshots of like their group thread of like sending it to 20 family members. I'm like, that's all it takes, guys. That's it. One person. That's all we need.
That's awesome. And I feel like if you just have a sign that says, are you between the ages of 18 and 35? Sign up here or something like that. So you don't have to go around asking people how old.
I know. Yes.
That might be helpful so that
Yes.
You're not put in that awkward position.
That's right. Yes. Yes. The little things we're learning along the way.
Yeah, yeah, but I
Yeah.
definitely have people on my phone that are between those ages, so I will help you as soon as you send me the QR code. So how can people stay connected to you?
Yeah, so we do have an Instagram account. It's Windsor Tough. We have a website, and on the website we have it again trying to keep things like as simple as possible. There's a Canadian flag and there's an American flag. And it says, if you live in Canada and you'd like to swab your cheek to save someone's life, please click here. You click there, fill out your information. Our friends at Canadian Blood Services will send you an envelope to your house. You swab it, you put it in the mail, no postage, no nothing. You're on the registry. Same thing in the US. If you live in the US, please click here. And it's got a big American flag. Click there, fill out your address and your name. Our friends at NMDP will send you an envelope in the mail. You swab your cheek, one right side of your cheek, one left side. You put on this little sticky thing in the envelope, fold it up, no postage. You're on the registry. So all of that can be done through the website.
What an incredible story. Thanks for sharing your journey with us. Is there anything else you would like to share before we come to a close?
No, I mean, thank you for having me and thanks for allowing me to share my story and talk a little bit about Windsor Tough. I think all of it just goes back to connecting with people, right? And Jenna and Twist and Brushes, that's what they do. Right. And it's such a great group of people that make up a great organization. Right. And honestly, like I know that I could reach out to so many people, that are under Jenna's umbrella, if you will, or that I've met through Twist and through Brushes that, would anyone in my network in a heartbeat. Right. So, Jenna talks a lot about it of when you're going through a cancer journey and you know this better than anyone. Sometimes there are some very lonely, dark days where you feel like no one else knows what you're thinking or what you're going through. So being able to even if it's just text with somebody, right? Or have a quick conversation, you're like, you know what? That's someone who I have maybe never met in person, but I feel closer to this person than some of my family members, right? Because we share a common bond. Like we're part of a club that nobody wants to be a part of. But thank God that, I was connected to these people because they've really, helped myself and my family. So I would just say anybody who, is in need of support, and that word can mean a lot of different things to different people. Like, don't be afraid to reach out to anybody and even to, strangers in organizations like Twist and Brushes that, literally change your life.
Yeah, community is so important. And I think sharing our story is really important too, so that others out there don't feel as alone. So thank you again
Absolutely.
for sharing your story today. And to our
Thank you.
listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Twist Out Cancer podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, and we'll see you next time.